Thank you, Uncle Tom, for the introduction and opening of the session as always. Assalamu alaikum, Molweni, good evening, Khoyanat. Welcome, colleagues. My name is Tawkir Ahmed, and this is the Knowledge Trailblazer Fireside Chat. I've got a bit of a flu, so do excuse me if I do cough now and then. And like the song said earlier on, I hope you love me for my flaws as well. Uh, but okay, so let's continue then, colleagues. So this is done in collaboration with the SAICE Academy, and thank you for connecting with us today. And just as always, I'd like to give just a quick brief background as to why and the purpose of these type of webinars. So these webinars is meant to simulate debate and discussion, mainly around civil engineering, but not only civil engineering, but even the broader civil engineering field. So anything to do with innovation, smart technologies, matters of mutual importance to civil engineers and the other forms of engineering disciplines, engagement and collaboration, and to also give a platform for our presenters to then showcase the good work that they are doing, and they need to be applauded for the good work that they do. It contributes to our society and the country as a whole, and I think all our presenters need to be applauded for that. So we've got a range of topics, this year. I see my camera's cut out. Not too sure if that's maybe the network, but okay, it seems as if I've got a problem with my camera, but I'll continue without the camera. Uncle Tom, I just want to check if I am still audible.
Yeah, we can still hear you and we still love you, Takir, so go for it.
Thanks for that. Yeah, like I said, I've got a range of topics lined up for you this year. Today being one on green hydrogen. And these are conducted on the second Thursday of every month. The typical format is a presenter presents, and we've got a panel of speakers where we engage on the topic at hand. Yourself as the audience, you're more than welcome to participate as well. Uncle Tom has then made the mics open as he indicated early on. He'll then monitor that from if you want to drop a note in the chat, please feel free to drop your comments and notes in the chat. So looking at today's topic, we are going to look at green hydrogen. And for those who are not familiar, it's a new and trendy buzzword for the 2020s. Not only a buzzword, it's a new and promising technology, one that's worth looking into and investigating and learning more about. Just for interest's sake, this past Tuesday was the World Hydrogen Day. So for those who are not familiar, it was World Hydrogen Day. Just a quick background in terms of hydrogen. So green hydrogen typically is hydrogen that's produced using water electrolysis, where you've got now solar and wind power, and that makes it green. And it's considered green because it does help reduce the emissions. I know there may be a bit debate around the cost of it right now, but any new technology will always start out high and become more cost effective as you go forward. So again, green hydrogen is a promising alternative to fossil fuels and a key component in decarbonizing our energy future. It can help for us as South Africans, help diversify our energy mix, reduce our reliance on imported fossil fuels so that we can become more energy independent. Plus, because it's a new industry, it means new jobs, stimulate the economy, create a new economy for us. So we have now the Department of Science and Innovation that has played quite a key and pivotal role, and we'll hear that from our guest speaker, Dr. Rebecca, just now. So obviously, what the DSI have done, there's a couple of things they've initiated, such as the Hydrogen, Valley, and the study around that. That looks at establishing a hydrogen valley from Gauteng down to the Durban region. It also looks to try and maximize on our platinum abundance. So as you would know, that South Africa's got 90% of the world's platinum. So how can we take full advantage of that and further add benefits to that? What you have is that DSI have also gone and developed the hydrogen roadmap. The roadmap becomes, quite a strategic plan for the country in terms of our, decarbonization goals and also creating a whole new economy. And so, the DSR has taken quite a lot of proactive steps in this process by, taking lead in creating a hydrogen economy for us as a country, and laying the groundwork in terms of the direction that we need to follow as a country. So today we've got a few guest speakers. I've got Dr. Rebecca Maseremule. I've got Mr. Lawrence Clutie and Mr. Feldman, Fergus Feldman. Let me allow my guest speakers to introduce themselves. So if you can come, I'll call you on. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what your involvement in hydrogen is specifically. So Dr. Rebecca, can I ask you to come through? If you can maybe just put on your camera and then introduce yourself. Thank you.
I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Rebecca Massa-Ramole. I'm the Chief Director of Hydrogen and Energy at the Department of Science and Innovation, and I'd like to say thank you so much to Takir and his team for the invitation to present today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Lawrence, can you come through and then also introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Takir. Lawrence Kluter. I work for a company called Rebel Group. We're an economics and finance advisory, and we do work in hydrogen at the strategy and policy level, where we work quite closely with the Department of Science and Innovation, and Rebecca specifically. We also do techno-economic studies and quite a few projects on regulations, codes, and standards, as well as green hydrogen certification. I personally work in South Africa, also Namibia, and North Africa, Algeria, and Tunisia, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Lawrence. And Fergus, if you could come through and also introduce yourself.
Yes, so well, thank you very much, Takir, and good afternoon to all the guests on the call. My name is Fergus Feldman. I'm founder and CEO of Atlantia Green Hydrogen, and we are developing a green hydrogen and ammonia producing plant in the Freeport of Saldanha in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you, Fergus. So that's our presenter and two technical panel members today, colleagues that will be engaging in a discussion after the presentation. So yeah, I think then let's maybe get cracking with the presentation. And so Dr. Rebecca, if you could maybe just maybe from your side share the presentation, and then I'll hand over to you.
Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, it's visible. I think you can just put it in presentation mode.
Okay. Now it's in presentation mode. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Okay,
so thanks.
So I know, we started off with talking about green hydrogen, but I wanted to be a bit maybe provocative and say clean hydrogen. So the reality is clean hydrogen includes renewable hydrogen, which most people call green. So you're assuming that the hydrogen is produced from renewable solar, wind, or hydropower. And then you have blue or hydrogen, which includes fossil fuels, but you have carbon capture and use. And those are the two that I'm looking at. And the reason why I'm including those is because even though there's been a lot of announcements, majority of hydrogen today is either from fossil fuels or blue, or from fossil fuels with CCU. And then what is the progress of these projects? What investments are being made? This talk about energizing the path to net zero is based on reducing the cost. So like countries like the US have what we call a hydrogen shot, where they're trying to get a kilogram of green hydrogen to be $1 per kilogram by 2030. And then what is the policy support? Because we know it's not really at parity with is fossil fuel based comparisons. And then what are we doing on skills? And then because I'm the Department of Science and Innovation, I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about what are we doing for research and development in South Africa. So like I say, if you look at the state of in 2023, 2024, the majority of hydrogen globally has been produced with fossil fuels. Granted, there's been a lot of progress, but I would say that most of your, you have the majority of your hydrogen is produced from natural gas without carbon capture and use. So about 63% of natural gas production is unabated. And then you have the second largest one is you have fossil fuels with carbon capture and use. And again, coal gasification, about 20% of that is unabated, which means there's no carbon capture and use. And then you have refinery byproducts, and then you have a bit that's using CCUS with fossil fuels, and then a very little small portion is from electrolyzers. But what's been consistent is the areas of the world where hydrogen is actually produced. So it's China is the majority of production globally, and then you have Middle East, which makes sense because that's where your oil refineries are. You have United States, India. We have large refineries in India, Europe, Latin America, Canada, Australia, and then the rest of the world. So this is consistent with more or less the sectors where you're going to have hydrogen or even clean hydrogen being used will be in the oil and gas sectors. And then really, you have, hopefully you understand that unfortunately, majority of hydrogen is with fossil fuel based. There are a lot of announcements around electrolyzer capacity because we know that clean or green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen really uses electrolyzers. So in terms of announced capacity, again, you have quite a bit of announced capacity in Europe, Australia, Africa is even on the map, Latin America, US, Canada, China, and rest of the world and India are mentioning projects. So if you look at the planned capacity by the end of 2030, it's 230 gigawatts of planned capacity. And I think that, like I said, it's nice to see that globally, it's not just in one place versus another, it's across the world because we have renewable resources globally. You have Latin America at 17%, Europe 25% of the global share, Australia, just a small continent, is 15%. And I think, like I said, we would love to see that Africa and Latin America would have higher capacities or higher planned rollouts, but unfortunately, it's really expensive in terms of the capex, especially for electrolyzers and as well as for the renewables. So essentially, in order to achieve these planned capacities, we're going to have the sectors going to grow up at almost above 100% from 2024 onwards. And if you look at, so now we have a lot of announcements, we have a lot of planned capacity. The question is, what is actually making it to what we call final investment decision? So in terms of final investment decision, and it's the interesting thing is it's been a handful of huge projects which have gone to final investment decision. So in terms of what has made it to final investment decision, you have Europe with the majority of them, North America with the Inflation Reduction Act has a few, China, again, largest producer of hydrogen, largest number of FID projects, and then you have India as well as then the rest of the world in Middle East. So if you look at the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, there's 2.2 gigawatts for the NEOM project. That project was mostly able to come to final, what we call final investment decision, because I believe one company, I believe it was Air Products, took 100% of the offtake of that project. So that's why they were able to, so we don't know who Air Products will sell this product to, but we know 100% of that offtake was taken. But also the Saudi Arabian government actually invested heavily into that project, also with regards to lands and support. Europe, in terms of their policies and so forth, they've been able to come to FID 2 gigawatts just within 1 year. China, again, the largest final investment decisions, 2.8 gigawatts. And then India, more recently with recent policies, has been able to reach 1.3 gigawatts due to a green ammonia fertilizer plant. Now, in terms of the areas where your electrolyzer capacity will have reached FID, again, 6.5 gigawatts in total. But the majority of the use is in the industrial sector. So the sectors which are currently using hydrogen are the sectors where the projects are really going to be rolled out. Transport, we're expecting fuel cell electric vehicles to come out widely, especially in heavy duty, but transport sector is seriously behind, probably with most of that performance happening in Asia, especially China, South Korea, and so forth. And then you have FID of the total, looking to, again, ammonia production, methanol refinery, and then just a little bit of that capacity, electrolyzer capacity, is for final investment decisions in producing methanol for transport and shipping. We know there's a huge opportunity in the shipping sector, especially with plans to net zero for shipping, but they're lagging behind, especially the industrial sector. And then what I thought was really interesting, we're talking about FID, final investment decision. And again, part of the reason why I'm talking about clean hydrogen is quite a few of those final investment decisions were for fossil fuel-based production, but with carbon capture and use.
Afterwards.
So it's important to note that even though using fossil fuel-based inputs for hydrogen production, there is still a cost when it comes to abatement using carbon capture and use. And I think, but we can't undercount the importance of having those types of projects. Even as the price of your natural gas goes up and down, at some point in time, blue hydrogen or production of hydrogen from natural gas using carbon capture and use and storage was actually on par with gray hydrogen or hydrogen production without CCUS. Then in terms of the overdue deployments, and this is just a high level, really 50% of the low carbon hydrogen is in North America. So that's really interesting. And like I said, the Inflation Reduction Act is having a huge impact on how private sector is choosing to invest around the world. And then in terms of committed infrastructure around hydrogen infrastructure, it's grown to about 6.5 billion, of which 45% of this is in the Middle East. So in essence, like you say, you're seeing investments across the world of deployments. But also what I thought was really interesting is in terms of electrolyzer manufacturing capacity, it's nearly up to 11 gigawatts, where it was previously 9 gigawatts in the previous year. And I think if you look at total fuel cell global capacity stands at around 15 gigawatts, up from 12 gigawatts. That means that there are still opportunities for South Africa and other countries to come into supplying the market. And this is where a lot of the capacity is sitting in Asia, South Korea, China, and Japan. And in part, they have very robust strategies around, South Korea and Japan have very robust hydrogen strategies, which talk to the importation of low emissions hydrogen, unlike China, which will probably produce and consume its own hydrogen. And then I think that in terms of investments, Europe, again, is one of the largest areas where investment is happening, where a total combined investment of about 4.5 billion. I won't go into really detail, but this just gives you a high level view of the investments on deployments globally. I think one thing that's important to note is that in Asia, again, I think Korea, China, I think more than 80% of refilling stations have been deployed in just these two countries alone. They also are responsible for about 80% of the global fleet around heavy duty trucks for hydrogen. But then also you see that different countries have different reasons why they are deploying hydrogen in their countries for decarbonation. Now, this is where things really get interesting. So there have been many announcements. And I think at the end of May 2023 was 1,000. I think more recently, there was 1,418 projects which were announced. You have gigascale projects, 166, 719 large-scale industrial use. And like I said, as the projects get smaller, the size of the projects, you have less projects. And in part, this is because we know that economies of scale is really important to bring the cost of the technologies down. But then if you go even further, remember, you go from announcement to feasibility study to front-end engineering design to final investment decision. You start seeing that of that projects, 300 have been announced or have been announced as a press announcement or preliminary studies. 214 of those have been at feasibility level, and then you have about 117 of those are at front-end engineering design, which is great progress. But then 370 are actually have taken a final investment decision. So some bank has committed to that project and also or have started construction or are operational. And you notice that if you look at the dots along here, a lot of your FID projects are in North America, Asia, and in Europe. And in part, this is because the policies of those countries have given, in most cases, private sector, either grants, low-cost loans, They're funding maybe upfront capex grant level. So I think this speaks to the fact that how do countries like South Africa or other emerging and developing countries, get into the game when you don't have a big fiscal wallet to get you into the game. And then also I thought which was really interesting, is really looking at this ramp up of projects. I mean, in 2020, there were almost no projects, but then post-COVID, and then you're seeing the growth in terms of planning, announced, committed planning. I mean, the number of projects which are in planning stage are much larger than the cumulative projects that we had even at one time in 2020. So I think in terms of this progress, like I said, again, most of the capacity is committed in a handful of places. Like North America has about 60% of the commitments, China followed by 20%, and Europe and Middle East around 8% each. Again, like I said, most of the progress or performance is in the global north, but like I said, there are lots of opportunities for the global south to get involved and so forth. And I think you probably were disappointed in my first slide when I showed that most of your hydrogen projects were fossil fuel based, but most of the capacity which is announced is more than 90% of it for renewable hydrogen. So that means that we are moving in the right direction. And when you start, focusing on renewables and bringing the cost down, this is where the renewables rich regions of the global south, like South Africa and Namibia, can get involved. Now, one thing I thought was really, really interesting was this issue around strategy and targets for hydrogen. So in 2017, there was only one country globally that actually had a strategy on hydrogen, and that was Japan. And then France came along, had one strategy. Then 2019, early players like Australia, Korea. Then 2020, it was like Canada, Chile. You started seeing even strategies in different parts of the world, Belgium, Colombia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Morocco. Now you start seeing Africa show up. 2021. In 2022, South Africa, we published our policy, our Hydrogen Society Roadmap. Namibia, China, Costa Rica, even Latin America. Then in 2023, you saw this huge, group of countries from all across the world, Africa, Latin America, Asia again, Middle East started with policies on hydrogen. And then recently in 2024, you have Iceland, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, Tunisia, Lithuania. So what I thought was interesting is that 58 governments have strategies, with the EU and ECOWAS accounting for 84% of, and these countries account for 84% of energy-related CO2 emissions globally. So that means that your hydrogen strategies are in part going to be helping out countries with their national determined contributions, and so forth. But essentially, I think hydrogen is on its way to go from a gas to what we call energy vector. But then also, just in the last 12 months alone, 19 governments published a new strategy for hydrogen. And 3 governments, I think Japan, I know Germany, and I believe US updated their strategies in this past year. So I think one of the challenges we have, so there's a lot of hype around hydrogen, but the majority of hydrogen strategies are focused on exports. So it's saying taking your rich renewable resource and exporting to the rest of the world. And no new strategy in the last 2 years has actually been developed with the view to import hydrogen. So there's going to be a mismatch between export of hydrogen and the importation of hydrogen. So which means that in order for countries to have vibrant hydrogen economies, you're going to have domestic consumption of your products. And then even in China, again, one of the largest producer and consumer of hydrogen globally, even at the provincial level, you're starting to see plans and targets around hydrogen. And even in South Africa, Northern Cape has a strategy. Eastern Cape is in the process of developing a strategy. Gauteng is in the process of developing a strategy. And even I think eThekwini municipality has a strategy around hydrogen. Now, in terms of demand creation, again, like I said, less countries are looking to import. So there needs to be a lot of focus around the creation of demand for hydrogen. And most countries are either doing it by policies in force or by demand targets. So countries like Korea, Singapore, they have announced support for power sector, which would be a huge reason for importation. And then you're also going to see aviation, like sustainable aviation fuels featuring. And then if we're successfully able to implement these policies, you're going to see a double or doubling of the demand for hydrogen up into the near term into 2030. And then I think one of the key issues for most stakeholders is, when do we make our investment? When do we make a decision? And like I said, there are a total of 16 new policies focusing on mitigating investment risk in the sector. And again, contracts for difference. Green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen is more expensive. You need to start bringing the costs or the differential together. You have tax incentives for companies, as well as auctions for renewable ammonia, methanol, and green hydrogen. So EU, UAE, Canada are getting into that process. And then 3 countries I think I wanted just to focus on: United States, like I said, the Inflation Reduction Act and other policies, $750 million for 52 hydrogen projects across 24 states. Over 40% of those are for electrolyzer manufacturing alone, and 20% for fuel cell manufacturing. So they're looking at, even the 1.9 billion for clean technology manufacturing projects under the qualifying advanced energy project credit of the era is substantial. And then in Europe, you have specific policies for technology manufacturing. You have the Net Zero Industry Act, which sets domestic targets, which will hopefully improve the uptake of hydrogen, and in other frameworks. And then India, again, for those of us in South Africa looking at BRICS, BRICS is able to, through India, is looking at a total allocation of $500 million for electrolyzer manufacturing. And I think there was a bid last year, and out of the 8, there were 8 winning companies, and I heard that actual that bidding process was oversubscribed. So they're looking at maybe a second tranche coming by the end of 2024. So what I think was important to note is that, we're talking about these projects, we're talking about everyone's going into investment, but what's really critical, I think, right now is the fact that you have this promotion of R&D. So just in the last 5 years alone, R&D expenditure has just increased. You have rapidly increasing in the US, 150 million in 1 year to almost 3 times increase 2 years later. And then also, I think what's important is the promotion of R&D, innovation, knowledge sharing across many platforms like the Hydrogen Council. You have the IPHE, the IEA Technical Cooperation Program, UNIDO, IRENA. These organizations are working with governments to implement the hydrogen economy. More specifically, I know UNIDO is partnering with South Africa on the Green Climate Fund Readiness Program and the JEF facility on a global clean hydrogen program. Now, I think what you probably have interest in is on issues of skills. And like I said, there are certain skills. I mean, like I said, hydrogen economy, hydrogen is here as a gas, not necessarily an energy vector, but there's quite a few jobs which are currently, and this is a profile that was taken in Europe, of the actual opportunities for jobs like manager level, environmental jobs, engineers, technicians. And then what I think I want to drill in on is that there's some jobs where they don't even have people available or ready to actually support in the hydrogen economy. So you're seeing a lot of movement of your professionals across borders, especially those who have a background in hydrogen. Even HISA program, we produce a lot of masters and PhDs. Quite a few of them are living and working abroad in some of the lead economies on hydrogen globally. And then last but not least, on skills, I want to talk to the fact that there's requirement of future occupations. And this is work, again, looking at what's going on in Europe. Fuel cell mobility technician. These are jobs which don't even exist right now. Design engineers around fuel cells. So I think it's important to know that even as we prepare for the future, we put in place the pipeline for that future. And then just in South Africa, drilling down, like I said, some of our catalytic projects said that we're expected to create between 20 and 30,000 jobs annually between 2030 and 2040, respectively. And even if you look at indications out of the green hydrogen commercialization strategy, we're looking at around a minimum of 650,000 jobs for the green hydrogen value chain by 2050 for both export and domestic use. And recently, through the Department of Higher Education and Training, they identified about 138 occupations which were required for this economy. 35 types of engineers, tradesmen, technicians, specialists. This report has been published, managerial positions, as well as elementary level occupations. And this is when important that you have jobs across the whole entire value chain, blue collar to white collar jobs. And then what I think is interesting, we've spoken about investments. Again, this is most of your investments are again in China. Most of your investments are in the industrial sector, and this is not surprising given where the sector is going. And then what I thought was really interesting, I willing to drill in this, and why I call it clean hydrogen, is there are quite a few investments in the use of fossil fuels for using carbon capture, use and storage. There are, again, in the Netherlands and in China, this is where you're still doing fossil fuel based with carbon capture and storage and use. And Netherlands, it was a project which was retrofitted, and in China, I think was a greenfields project. But I think that in terms of where you have the largest projects, you have in Eastern Louisiana hydrogen complex in the United States. So there's a huge oil and gas industry there. And then the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia was the second largest project in terms of FID for low emissions hydrogen. And then in terms of infrastructure, I think one of the things that we need to drill into, and this is a huge risk, is the fact that investment levels for infrastructure that support hydrogen is less than 5% of what is needed to get to implement those projects. This is a real big issue that needs to be addressed by governments. And the thing is, quite a few countries are looking at this, and European Commission is looking at financing for guarantees for hydrogen pipelines. You have, companies are looking at refilling solutions and, trying to get banks to actually provide the funding to implement these projects. And then I think last but not least, for clean investment, about 7.3 billion has been allocated by development banks. But I think if you look at the numbers, majority of the money is really circulating in India, Chile, Turkey is getting a bit of money. Namibia, Brazil actually got money. So I was happy to see that the multilateral development banks are funding in Africa, so that specifically the Hyphen project in Namibia, but you also do have projects cropping up in BRICS countries like Brazil and India. Now, drilling into South Africa, I think what's important to know, and you probably know this, is that one, in South Africa, we have the key policies. And I'm proud to say that if you look at the schematic, each and every one of these policies have been developed and approved by cabinet. And I think at this point in time, I think the South African government needs to get a round of applause, because it's not often that you see a situation where things that we set out to do, we did it also within reasonable time periods. And the quality of the policies coming out is actually excellent. And I do know that we have been slightly behind on implementation of the green transport strategy, but there's a revival in government towards the implementation and ensuring those targets in the green transport strategy will be met. Now, because I'm Department of Science and Innovation, I'm going to take this time to talk about my specific department and what we're doing. So we have what we call energy flagship programs that support South Africa's movement towards a net zero economy by 2050. We have 4. We have renewable energy, which talks to solar PV, solar thermal, wind, localization of energy, renewable energy components. The second one is looking at energy storage, and this is looking at beneficiation of raw materials that we have in South Africa, like manganese, nickel, cobalt, and so forth. Looking at the whole value chain for batteries, like cell and pack production, cathode production, electric vehicle production plants, and then hydrogen in South Africa, which has existed since 2007, 2008. And then more recently, the new kid on the block, what we call co-CO to the X. So looking at flue gas from industrial facilities, as well as power plants, and producing sulfuric acid, producing ammonia sulfate, like fertilizer, salts, and then even in some cases, power to liquids like methanol production. So, and we do this research and development in South Africa. And then also there's a strong component of skills development and capacity building. So drilling into the HISA program, we deal with upstream, downstream R&D along the whole value chain. If you can produce hydrogen, compress it, storage, distribute it, and then use it in fuel cells, and then actually have systems integration. And currently we have 5 institutions that we are funding since 2007, 2008. HISA infrastructure with Nelson Northwest University and CSR, HISA catalysis with UCT and Mintech, and then HISA systems at the University of the Western Cape. So in terms of the last, I would say, 17 years of funding, 17 years of the program, we spent about 1.49 billion rands on R&D. And I think Lauren should know this because he's helped us with some of our review processes recently. And in terms of the performance, like I said, we've graduated over that time period, quite a few number of students, and this is successfully graduated. Publications, you see that we have close to 400 publications. We have quite a few numbers of patents filed, patents granted, and most of our patents are filed or granted in our jurisdiction as well as in jurisdictions like US, Europe, Asia, and so forth. We have quite a few prototypes that we've deployed in South Africa successfully, tech demonstrations in partnership with private sector, as well as commercial products. But what you can start seeing is really the performance of the program has progressed from high-end or less mature things like publications through to technology demonstrations in commercial products. I think we're proud to say that over the time period that the gender of students that we've graduated has started to become not necessarily at par with 50%, but we're starting to see a lot more women coming through the system. And even in terms of nationality, most of the students are South African, but we do graduate students from the rest of Africa and the rest of the world. And then last but not least, in terms of the population, majority of the students were not Black South Africans initially, but now in the third phase, the majority of students are Black South Africans. So it's kind of fitting the demographics of the country. So I'd say that we properly have transformed the program. And then last but not least, I think in terms of gender, 33% female, again, 82% South African, and then in terms of, and then 44% Black students. And then jobs created, we've created quite a few jobs over the last couple of years. The first phase only just under 70, over close to 180 in the second phase, and again close to 200 in the third phase of the program. And towards the third phase, we started producing, taking opportunities for unemployed graduates, like from TVETs and University of Technology, into the program. And then last but not least, I want to just focus on the fact that we have spent 1.4 billion, but we have quite a bit of intellectual property has been generated by the program. Most of the program has been in fuel cell components like fuel cell membrane electrode assemblies, catalysts, which is the heart of your fuel cell, but also some intellectual property that talks to the storage of hydrogen and so forth, like liquid organic hydrogen carrier and so forth, as well as work towards electrolyzers. And like I said, again, in terms of granted, 60 were filed, but 36 or just over half of those were granted in multiple countries. So I'd just like to end there. Hopefully I stuck to my 40 minutes, hopefully. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Dr. Rebecca. Much appreciated, and I must say, well done. Quite a lot of work that you put into it, and very technical and detailed, and gives us quite a nice overview of what's happening globally, and then what we've done as a country. And I must say, I'm quite impressed to see the number of patents that's been developed, and I mean, just to show that as much as this is new technology, South Africans have actually developed new and unique aspects and elements into it. And I just want to ask then maybe quickly, and I've got a range of things I've jotted down on the side, but if we've then developed quite heavily into fuel cells, when are we going to start manufacturing our own fuel cell driven vehicle? I mean, maybe that's the next step for yourself, to put out a car. I see you got motorbikes.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think one of the things we learned from the previous drill experience is that you can actually work on, you don't necessarily do the whole entire system. Sometimes you stay where you have special capabilities. And I would say in South Africa, going back decades, not just years, but decades, probably almost like 30 to 40 years, we have experience in catalysts. That's why SAICE was so powerful, because it was like South African scientists, by the way, who were working on catalysts, the Fischer-Tropsch process and so forth. So we have that capabilities in private sector as well as academia. So we're focusing on the components that make the most sense for us, where we have capabilities. And I think I was saying Lawrence would know, because Rebel Group did some extensive work for us back in 2018, which gave us some advice as to where we should focus our efforts. And some of the data they actually helped us generate through some of the work they supported us in. So.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, I think this will be quite a key point or key place for you to come through then, Lawrence. I think if you can just maybe give us a bit of insight in terms of what Rebecca has presented, and seeing that I think with yourself being the advisor, you've also advised DSI and country as a whole. So yeah, maybe just give us your views in terms of the presentation, and where do you see the country going forward as well in green hydrogen or clean hydrogen?
Thanks, Takir, and thanks, Rebecca, for an inspiring presentation. I think Rebecca's been a bit modest. I think the Department of Science and Innovation can actually take a lot of credit for starting the hydrogen policy trajectory much earlier than many other countries. An important reason is, of course, of our PGM resources that you mentioned when you were making your opening remarks. So already in the early 2000s, South Africa was starting to think about this. I think we spoke about the platinum economy, and then it became clear it's really a hydrogen economy. And of course, platinum is key for fuel cells, but in electrolyzers, iridium, which is even scarcer, South Africa really is the world leader on that as well. So it's definitely in our interest to promote PEM electrolyzers where these are used. And I think the SAICE program has done excellent work in terms of stimulating R&D and skills development. You were asking about a South African fuel cell-based car, and I think I agree with Rebecca. Getting into the car business is very complex, but South Africa does produce cars, and we export a lot of cars. So hopefully, maybe in future, one of our vehicles will have a fuel cell in. But of course, we have made a fuel cell vehicle. Anglo American has built a huge mining truck with a fuel cell in it, and that replaces I don't know how many thousands of liters probably per minute or something like that. But I think what's also important is that we're already making components for the hydrogen economy. The University of Cape Town has developed membrane electrode assemblies that are of world-class quality, and they're exporting some of that to Europe, which then gets used in other applications. So yeah, I think we've done, actually, I remember you said that you might ask me about where we stand on policy and where are the policy gaps. I think we're actually doing very well in terms of policy. We have the Hydrogen Society roadmap as well as the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy. And there we have made estimates of the export market that we can take a share of, and I think I see Ibrahim is in the audience. He can maybe tell us more about that. But we actually took, as a country, a fairly conservative estimate so that we don't need to compete into an unhealthy way of that share. And it might, I know that there are other estimates that it could even be higher, but we're estimating as a country that we could export around 2 million tons of green hydrogen per annum. Maybe to just talk a little bit about why is there an export opportunity. The export opportunity arises mainly in countries that have too little sun and wind and too little space. to make their own green hydrogen. So Germany is clearly a major market, Belgium, the Netherlands. So the whole of Europe is planning to import, I think, 10 million tons per annum by 2030 and produce their own. In places like Norway and so on, they can do it from hydro, and they can also do blue hydrogen. The other two countries that always come to mind when you think about export is Japan and South Korea. I think both of those countries are too far north to have the type of sun we have, and they have an even bigger problem with space. So clearly there is an export opportunity, and I think the reason the export opportunity is important is, although South Africa targets almost the same quantity for domestic use, we have to be realistic that at the moment there's a price gap between the fossil fuel-based solutions, whether it's directly diesel and aviation fuel and so on, or whether it's grey hydrogen and green hydrogen, which is a clean fuel. And we don't have the kind of carbon taxes at the moment that will force that. If we get to the future carbon tax of 600 tons, 600 rand a ton, then we're starting to approach a more level playing field for green hydrogen. So the export markets will be important to unlock production, in my view, but not just the direct export markets. There are things that we export, like steel or at least iron ore, that might be actually quite a good vector for exporting green hydrogen. If we can refurbish Saldanha and change it into a green steel plant, that could be a very effective way of actually exporting our sunshine and wind. And there are studies underway, and I don't think many people know, but steel causes about 7% of the world's greenhouse gases. So it's not an insignificant thing, and it's not just the heat requirement. It's the iron reduction process, and that you can't eliminate by replacing it with electricity. You have to fundamentally change the process, and you're using hydrogen as a feedstock. But maybe I should stop there and hear if you have any other specific things you want to ask me.
No. Thanks, but thank you for your insight. And then just to add on to the comments from Dr. Rebecca as well, it does give a much more broader context in terms of what else is going on out there. And I must say, look, if you look at now the steel aspect or the green steel aspect, you've got now the carbon border adjustment that Europe has then issued the policy, and that in essence is forcing industries to start becoming more greener. And it only adds to our advantage to then start moving that direction, because I mean, if we want to export, and if we don't allow for some sort of greening of our process, then we can't export. So it does impact us in the long run. So definitely something that is worth considering when it comes to these things. Let me then just maybe ask Fergus to also come in, and Fergus, I think you on the other end. So we've got a policymaker, we've got the government, but you are the entrepreneur that will then make this happen. So how do you see this this opportunity? I mean, there's a lot of, as what Rebecca indicated, is that if you look at the other countries like the US and Europe, and India and whatnot, a lot of money is going into it from the private sector. The private sector is developing it, and also those policies and government on that side makes it quite easy for new companies to start up. So yourself in this environment is still new for us in South Africa. We're still trying to develop the policy. So how has this impacted you, and what have you done to get this? I mean, and I'm sure it must have not have been an easy journey. So just give us your journey thus far, and how have you made it to the stage and so forth. Yeah.
Thanks, Takir. So we are an independent developer, right? We started with a dream, having produced hydrogen almost 20 years ago from electrolysis. So we knew it's possible. You know, the scale is very different, the feed electricity is very different, but we've been watching this space very intently since 2015 as well. So about 4 years ago, as per Rebecca's slides, we could see significant activity picking up, you know, in terms of what's happening around the world with regards to the interest in green hydrogen. What we found was that a few things, you know, we all excited, we rushed there into the commercial world and speak to the financiers. Their eyes just glazed over when they saw the figures. You know, their models were not made for this. You know,
Yeah.
it's the you know, the risk calculation for an opportunity like this is from the people that were there with the renewables game. You know, solar 15, 20 years ago, speak about similar aspects. You know, where there was a lot of doubt, there was not a clear understanding of what the opportunity entails. So it was rough. We had to do a lot of advocacy in the beginning as well. We spoke to some. Uh, how shall I put it now without naming and shaming, some entities that would be, you know, that we thought would be very excited about the alternatives in terms from an energy perspective that this would offer. And we were called futuristic. We were worried that we're going to be left behind at that stage, you know, as a
Yeah.
country. So it was very worrying in the initial phases, you know. Fortunately, what I must say is that we've had to speak right across the value chain and across the enabling environment. We had to speak to the politics, we had to speak to the finances, we had to speak to technology, we had to speak to the offtake markets, you know, that looked like there was progress, that looked like they're going to be the first. I see Monica is on the call. You know, they were always a front runner in the port of Rotterdam. So we understood their vision, you know, and we tried to plug into that, etc. as well. So no, it was not easy. You know, we had to do a lot more. We had to pave the road that we should have just been running on. You know, we had to pave it and run on the dirt road and then pave a little bit ahead of us, make sure the road is okay for those behind us. But in a nutshell, right, we're now at the stage where a lot of the funders have realized that they need to come into the earlier stages to get some of these projects over the line, right? We're having a lot more meaningful conversations. We've advanced a lot further down the line. You know, funders that were initially just interested in the, you know, the post-feed stage, you know, or even post or closer to FID stage, now started, at revising their models and coming a bit earlier into looking at, you know, the development side of these projects as well. So yes, it's been quite a journey. We obviously still have our challenges, you know, where we do know that some form of incentive, as alluded to by both Rebecca and Lawrence, will be required. I think we need to be a little bit creative about it as well. It does not have to be just the normal incentives in our market. It could be in the offtake market as well. For example, you know, those industries that will need to change. You know, Lawrence mentioned, for example, the steel industry. Can an incentive not be applied to help them with their switching cost? Right. So we would like the capital injection on our side to bring our cost of capital down and just to get the capital over the line. But there could be other mechanisms as well. So we would hope that there'd be a wider thinking of it. You know, there's the supply side and you're just cushioning the buying price on the demand side. There's a supply side bits where we are involved is to cushion the cost, the capex cost of our projects. But there's also this other side that can happen, you know, in the demand side where the final end users can be incentivized, especially where countries that are part of the just energy transition, that have a historic liability for the mess we sit with now in terms of our pollution. If they are a bit reluctant to let go, you know, of their money outside of their sovereign control, they could look at incentivizing their industries by not just, you know, offering them a tax incentive, etc., but actually hard incentives. You know, move to different types of burners or incinerators, etc. I'm just saying, you know, process equipment subsidies to switch to greener fuels as well.
Yeah. No, thanks for that insight, Ferguson. And I know it must have been quite tough, you know, journey getting there. But I mean, you in essence, you've made it almost there. You know, your project is under development and you're on the way. So maybe coming back to Dr. Rebecca in this slide. So what you see now is, as you indicated from the US, there's the Inflation Reduction Act, and you've got, you know, other, you know, incentives from government side that makes it easy for private company to come and invest. anything similar that us as South Africa we are planning? I don't know, I'll ask you, then maybe Lawrence from the policy, development point of view. So yeah, Rebecca, if you can just maybe share your views on that. Are we looking at anything as South Africa?
I would say that through the IDC, quite a bit of funding has been earmarked or allocated to South Africa. Recently you also have the 1 billion rands, or sorry, it's not rands, euros that has been indicated as part of the Netherlands South Africa partnership. So I think that that you have possible funds from the European Investment Bank. So there are funds. The question is, how do we get projects from conception stage through to what we call front-end engineering design to final investment decision? And I was doing some research, around this issue around how much these things cost. A front-end engineering design sometimes can cost upwards of 10 to 15% of the total project cost. So if you have a project that's 1 billion, that tells you how much your front-end engineering design costs. So it's not a small amount of money. So normally, I think we're used to funding smaller projects around 10, 20 million rands. And I think we need to actually get much more money for the front-end engineering design because it'd be expensive. But if you do it well, if you use, proper processes, you can actually overall reduce the total cost of your project by 30% if you do a feed study before you start. And I think we just have to tell them, you spend the money up front, you'll save in the long run. But we would need substantial funding from DFIs. We would need also, I think, training for our DFIs because, like I said, a lot of the projects that got across the finish line it wasn't like it was like Namibia's project, I think, is almost as large as the GDP, but so it's not like a trivial process to get it across the finish line. So I would hope that we would be respectful of our IDCs, our DBSAs that are trying to learn and so forth, and be patient with them.
No, definitely. I think it's still in development, and we need to try and encourage, as much as we can. Quite a lot of research and development still needs to happen in some aspects. So Lawrence, just coming back to from a policy development, obviously yourself as the advisor would mainly be involved in this. Anything happening from your front that you're involved in or you're aware of in terms of trying to incentivize the green hydrogen market?
Yeah, I mean, I think Fergus said that some of his remarks actually talk to the way I think about it. So from a finance perspective, obviously green hydrogen is highly capital intensive. It's high risk, it's new technology. So you need innovative solutions on the capital investment side. And the H2SA fund, which is what Rebecca, I think, was referring to with the partnership with the Netherlands, is a fund that uses blended finance. So I shouldn't use the word softer money, but the public funding and the DFI money is there to de-risk projects, to take them through those early stages so that commercial lenders and equity investors can then, with more confidence, invest their money. But I think Fergus is right that you can't just do that side because the people sometimes talk about the chicken and egg problem. You don't have buyers, and a buyer doesn't want to rely on something that's not reliably supplied. But we also have to look at the offtake side. So there's two problems on the offtake side. The one is guaranteed offtake. You need a large buyer, or you need a large enough buyer to build these large installations. And I think there's some interesting thinking starting to develop around that, whether you can have some sort of guaranteeing of the offtake side. And then the other is the price gap, the difference between what producers can produce at and what buyers are willing to pay for. And then in Europe, there's two mechanisms already working for that. The one is H2 Global, which has this contracts for a difference mechanism, and you have a double-sided auction. You get people on the producer's side to say, we can produce hydrogen at €3 a kilo, and then you get a European steel plant that says we'll buy it at at €4. So you have a €1 gap, and the European Union, or in this case, the German government, will then fund that difference and it's on a competitive basis. And the European Hydrogen Bank is essentially the same thing. They in fact use the H2 Global mechanism, and they've actually awarded the first contracts, so it's not just a dream anymore.
It's happening.
I'm not sure South Africa has the resources at the moment to do exactly that, but I think we do have to do things on the offtake side, whether it's to really support the steel plant, whether it's on sustainable aviation fuel, where we've got a real opportunity. We've been doing Fisher Traps at Sasol for almost not a century, but for many decades. And we have the carbon, the sustainable carbon source. We have many other countries that are good at producing hydrogen don't. They are deserts, so they don't have a sustainable carbon source. So I think we're in an interesting position. And then the other ingredient is people like Fergus. We need the entrepreneurs to say, I'm going to take a chance. You can call me futuristic. I don't care. I think this is important, and I think there is an opportunity. So we must support people like that and help them through those difficult phases. So those are some of my thoughts.
No, thanks, Lawrence. And look, I think it's quite important to look at this as from a holistic point of view, assist the entrepreneur and make this happen. And with us as a country, with our large carbon source, we've got all the industries, we've got now coal and whatnot. And how do we then both recycle and make use of it in a more clean and greener way is something that we need to look into. And I think that's the essence of what Dr. Rebecca is trying to indicate, from a clean hydrogen point of view instead of just green. And recycle. And then if you look at it now, again, talking from a futuristic point of view, if one can dream big, if you look at now your power to X, and you can start recycling the carbon and start producing not only methanol, but you've got your drop-in fuels. You can just do things cleaner. And coming back to your example of now what's this guy's now? The Anglo with their fuel truck. For a hydrogen fuel cell to power such a massive vehicle, it shows you the power of hydrogen, number one. And number two, if you can start making your mining green, the products that you get out of it now, as much it might be now, your aggregates and other raw materials, they technically become green as well. And so at the end of the day, you end up with a green economy because now your house that you build is green, your roads that you make are green, everything becomes green. So I think just the impact, is quite wide. There was something now recently in the media, and I don't know, just maybe for Rebecca and also Lawrence, for you just to maybe give some input into. So your AIDC recently launched multiple EV stations throughout the country. I had an opportunity of engaging with them yesterday. So they indicated, at least every 200 kilometers, they want to put in an EV station so that you can get a vehicle that can drive from Durban to Cape Town and easily find a place to charge the vehicle. So they are doing it, if you call it the other way around. So the EV market is still quite new. Vehicles still need to be imported. There's not many EV vehicles. So what they're hoping to do is that because now there's stations available to charge, that it will actually increase the demand for purchasing of EV vehicles. So likewise, are we looking at anything in terms of hydrogen? Are we planning any hydrogen network, hydrogen stations? Rebecca, I don't know if you might have any insight in terms of that.
Yeah, I don't know of any particular plans to put in place hydrogen fuel cell stations in South Africa. I do know that there's a consortium that's looking at the Hydrogen Valley and doing a further deep dive on Gauteng. Okay. And seeing if we do, if we have sufficient hydrogen in the area, where would we place the refilling stations? But the issue of it being enough economies of scale so that you can pay off the infrastructure costs investment is important. But also I think really where there's an opportunity would be in regional buses. So you have a bus that it fills up at the depot, goes out and comes back and refills back at the depot. So that's where the refilling costs would be cheaper, because you have multiple buses using the same pump. So that is possible. But I think that again, it's really around the demand for the policy. And then I know the CBAM is coming, that's going to affect mostly Scope 2 emissions. So until there's like a serious penalty, and I remember the work that Rebel Group did for us, they actually gave us an indication of the price the carbon tax would need to be in order for it to make a difference. And they was just saying that we're just not charging enough for the carbon tax currently. So we do have levers, and we do have levers, some, not many, but we do have a handful. And if we do take those levers that we can use, they actually may have a positive impact in the long run.
No. Thanks for that. No, so in essence, we need to encourage people through the taxes to start moving towards green. So Lawrence, just your views in terms of that. Yeah.
No, I'd like to follow up on that. I mean, I like Rebecca, I'm not aware of any existing plans to build fuel stations. I mean, there are a few hydrogen cars in South Africa. I don't know if you saw the Mirai or the BMWs that were at the Green Hydrogen Summit last year. And they must fuel those somehow. But it's not there's not a charging station. But I think for passenger cars, batteries have a lot of momentum, and it's supported by an ecosystem. So at the moment, I think most people think on road transport, it will be your very heavy vehicles, your large trucks, maybe some long distance buses. I know there's a town in Germany where they're using hydrogen buses because it's too hilly for electric buses. So that could also be a reason where you need more power. Sometimes the hydrogen is better. But I think we must remember transport is not just about road transport. The World Bank did a study on marine transport and the opportunity for bunker fuels. And whereas the International Maritime Organization for a long time was not that strict on carbon emissions, suddenly last year they brought out a new, I guess, a regulation on what the target levels should be. And this creates an opportunity for South Africa. We've always been a seafaring nation, and a nation where we replenish ships that come past the southern point of Africa. So there's a tremendous opportunity to be part of this green fuels for marine, and then of course aviation, which is super difficult to decarbonize. I can't see a battery Boeing 747 ever, and so there'll be a role for hydrogen there.
No, thanks for that, for Clinton, and maybe just some comments I could share just around that. So synthetic aviation fuel, at least Sasol is manufacturing that. And I think they're looking at making that more greener. So I think we're quite advanced compared to most countries globally in terms of that. And I'm myself coming from the port space, and one thing I can say, also interacting with the International Maritime Organization, and similar to what you've indicated now, is that you see now the IMO have changed policy, they become more stricter. And encouraging, or not encouraging, but and not to say you're forced to, but you have to comply now. You have to start decarbonizing. So that's what they've moved. They've moved for vessels to start decarbonizing, and what you see now, your shipping lines like Maersk have actually gone and launched, I think, about 3 methanol-powered ships. They're out on the water. They are sailing already. And I think they're picking up the bunker at I think both in Europe and out at Singapore to pick up on methanol and whatnot. So back to us, I think from a South African context, and like to indicate early on, is that we've got a lot of carbon, opportunity to recycle carbon there, so you can produce the methanol. So again, the opportunity is there to start looking at methanol and even ammonia. Fergus, just from your side, being the entrepreneur, I'm sure you're keeping a close eye on that in terms of, fuels from a, I'm not sure, I'm sure not only from shipping, but even, trucks and whatnot. So just give us a bit of insight on, do you have any plans to, produce and supply fuel as well, or just some insight on what are you looking at from that point of view?
Sure. So the maritime fuel study that you're referring to, right, the World Bank study, there's a keen focus on the port of Saldanha as a bunkering destination, and that is where our project would be. So that would be one of our key off-takers, once that comes into fruition. I know there's a bit of a challenge with the numbers still, like with all of the green hydrogen and derivatives products. But with the movements, of the Mercs and the IMO regulations, it is going to push marine in a certain direction, and we would then have one of the ideal ports to stop at and refuel. So ammonia, that's our plant's end product in Saldanha is key. Right, and we plan to then also be able to supply into that bunkering facility. It might change our plans dramatically in terms of the evolution of our project. We might have to go in much bigger steps. Instead of four incremental steps, we might have to jump straight into phase 3 or phase 4 from the beginning. If that off-taker is added to the mix. So most definitely, unfortunately, where we are, it's a little bit difficult. We don't have the carbon sources nearby. But there are other options in terms of the Eurospec fuel regulations, etc. Where we can complement existing fuel producers and refiners as well. That's in the Western Cape region.
Yeah, no, thanks. At least you're keeping an eye on that, and there's opportunities there. And I'm sure, look, as much as you might not have, carbon source, there is petroleum products coming in. I don't know, maybe you could then, recycle some of that, into your need as well. I just want to check with our audience online if anyone's got, any comments or questions. Please feel free to put up your hand. I think we are going to allow some of the audience to come through as well, and also then raise comments and questions. And I see we've got now some, industry players as well. It was mentioned that, both Ibrahim and Monica Swanson are online. If you want to maybe share some views and comments as well, you can also then come through. Let's take the first hand from Rhino. So Rhino, if you can come through and just ask your question or make your comments. I think Uncle Tom, if you can maybe assist with the mic.
Good afternoon, Rhino Kotze from Transnet Engineering. Thank you for a very interesting presentation and all the other comments. Just a question on the fuel cells. What do we project is going to be the fuel cell usage, I can say, for hydrogen in the future, say by 2030 and then up to 2050? I think I saw a number of 18 or 20%. And then the question is, will the world, and I think South Africa will come in there to grab the opportunity, will the world be able to produce all the PGMs that might be necessary for those fuel cells? Thank you.
Thanks, Rhino. Dr. Rebecca, would you want to take that question?
Yes. No, Rhino, thanks for that question. I think, depending upon where you are in the world, different countries are approaching the hydrogen economy differently. So if you go to Europe, e-mobility is a huge, China, South Korea, Japan, e-mobility is important. At one point in time, fuel cells in Japan were used for, stationary fuel cells for households and so forth. South Africa, we would maybe use fuel cell or stationary fuel cells initially for, dealing with issues like rolling blackouts, so backup power, but also for globe, in Africa in general, you have these cell phone towers that have challenges when there's power outages, and currently your MTMs, your CELSIs, there's a couple of hundred stationary fuel cells actually in South Africa, because diesel power, backup power is easily stolen, and so different countries are using it for different reasons. And then in terms of, will we be able to produce PGMs? Well, I think there's quite a bit of research being done around recycling of fuel cells. So even to some extent where the business models for fuel cells may be enhanced based on how you expect to deal with the product when it comes to end of life. So in some cases you can, I think PGMs, or the input of PGMs, is about 30% of the total cost of your fuel cell. So if you almost like lease to own and return, get that fuel cell back and then recover the PGMs out of that MEA, you would be able to maybe reduce the cost of ownership. And that's something that people are investigating. But I think with the circular economy would be required. And this is just not for PGMs, it's for other raw critical minerals for the energy transition, the ones that go into batteries, the ones that you need for, for solar panels and so forth. So I think this is an issue that we're all facing in the clean energy sector.
No, thanks. Thanks for the insight, Rebecca, and thanks, Rhino, for that. The next hand, and I see Hendrik. It looks like you are in twice, number 1 and number 3. I don't know if it's the same or it's two different Hendriks. Sorry, Hendrik, you can come through with your comment or question. Thank you.
You muted, Hendrik. There we go.
Afternoon. Yeah, there I go. Sorry, I think there's 2 Hendriks on. There's the Hendrik from DFFE as well, and notoriously sharing that component as well.
Okay.
but coming to that side is his colleagues just pertinent, and I posted it quickly. But very important for us, like Doc Rebecca was elaborating on PGM and also manganese and CBAM, and I just wanted to cohort that. And as mentioned by Fergus, our export orientation is pertinent for us, and therefore gearing our harbors. And Takia, I mean, we're working quite closely with you with Bucco Bay and getting that out there and being able to service our markets, i.e. Europe, the Far East, and having partners all over from Hamburg, Port of Rotterdam, very important for us. But very important also is converting the South African economy. And like Doc was saying, CBAM is knocking on the door in Lawrence. Because literally we are having our mining companies and our smelters already being inundated with demands from European-based OEMs and then European IP holders, but not just for them to manufacture an OEM, but also for demand of green steel, and thus being green iron ore, green manganese. So this is where I just quickly posted on the pipeline where I'm very excited is about the harbour infrastructure, Ludritz. It's a regional solution, Bucco Bay bulk aggregator and exporter, and Saldanha with its functionality of maritime. But the pipeline leading into central South Africa is so ideal and required because we have to feed through that iron ore manganese belt. Through the platinum belt, we need to convert that, feeding right into the hydrogen valley to supplement on that side. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and it's brilliant work done by Doc on the hydrogen valley that led us to this, also the west to east coast solution, whereby we will then alleviate the industries along that line and the tremendous potential for battery technology with the manganese. So just a quick knock in on that one. And therefore, we are urged to move very fast with this process as well to connect the hinterland to be able to successfully export. Thank you.
No, thanks, Hendrik, and thank you for the insight. Much appreciated. Again, to show you that there is the demand and strong demand globally, and for us to move quick and take advantage of the opportunity. I don't know if the panel would want to respond.
Maybe, Fergus, I can make a quick comment. I mean, I agree with, I know both Hendriks quite well. This Hendrik that just spoke when we tried to come back from the European Hydrogen Week last week, we were almost stuck in Zurich in a snowstorm. But in any case, I think he highlights an important issue, and that's of infrastructure. I think there are several projects on ports, and I think Takir would know about the work in Saldanha, where there's Rebel is also involved in that. And then apart from the feasibility study on the Namibia South Africa pipeline, Rebel is doing a project with the CSIR funded by GIZ, looking at what they call hydrogen delivery scenarios, but it's really about how you how we should transport bulk hydrogen within the country, and it's an optimization model, and the results should be available early next year. We're currently looking at where to put the demand nodes and the supply nodes, and then to see different modes of transport. So I agree that the infrastructure, apart from finance, I think the other critical enabler is infrastructure, and then of course offtake.
No, definitely. I mean, we need to build to support the growing industry as well. Okay, no, thanks for that, Lawrence. I've got two more hands, and so I've got Michelle, and then Hendrik. So we'll then just take those two hands, and then so colleagues, I'm also keeping an eye on time. If there's more time, then we'll take another hand after that. But so let's take Michelle, if you can come through. Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to make a comment to Dr. Masarule. Blue hydrogen, very controversial. I beg to disagree substantially and substantively that blue hydrogen is actually clean hydrogen. If you take the natural gas cycle from drilling to extraction to combustion, etc., it's everything but clean. In fact, 2% fugitive emissions of natural gas equate to the same global warming potential as coal. So natural gas is not something that we should be looking at as a country, particularly in light of what CBAM is going to do to our exports, particularly to the EU and in future to the US, Japan, and South Korea. So yeah, the perception out there is that the discourse on blue hydrogen being clean hydrogen is a discourse that is perpetuated by the fossil fuel industry to retain the infrastructure. But in fact, one should just talk about green hydrogen rather than blue hydrogen, and forget about blue hydrogen altogether, unless it's a transition measure to build the infrastructure required to convey hydrogen, but a very, very, very short-term transition. Otherwise, we are not really achieving anything.
No, thanks, Michelle. Sorry, Michelle or Michael. Apologies. Okay. Dr. Rebecca, do you want to take that comment just to give some feedback?
No, I don't mind. I appreciate your comments, and I think that if you look at the two projects in Netherlands, they're natural gas retrofitted with CCUS. So thing is, they have an existing plant and they convert it or retrofit it with CCU. So most cases, people are going to sweat their assets and use them as is, and Netherlands didn't have to take their existing, natural gas production, hydrogen production from natural gas, and then invest in carbon capture, use, and storage. But they did do that. So I think that there's an acknowledgement of saying this is low-hanging fruit. Let me do something today. Let me not wait for the technology to mature to for renewable hydrogen before I make that decision. So you have to respect that. Also, even for coal gasification, China does have a project where they're including carbon capture use, and I think over time with with improvements, you may have a situation where I think in terms of for those facilities that do use carbon capture, use, and storage, I think the percentage of what they're what they're storing is very minimum, but it's their intentions to move towards almost 80-90% over time. And for countries like South Africa, which have I think with the installed capacity is around over 70%. There needs to be some options that we go towards. South Africa has an abundance of renewables. So in the green hydrogen commercialization strategy is very explicit and very about our intentions, which is about green and renewable. But some countries may take different options. And if you look at the strategy for Japan, it says very specifically, or Korea, who are the countries that are doing the importation, they're saying the price of renewable hydrogen must be the following in order for us to purchase it. So they're being very explicit. It's on the market value. And that's what's most important for having a sustainable hydrogen economy globally.
No, thanks, Rebecca. And it's also quite not an easy question to answer because where do you start first? And again, different countries will take different approaches, and we do have quite a lot of coal as well, and we've got now the gas, and so again, yes, again you might see a mix initially in the transition. So there will have to be some form of transition, in my opinion. So you might see better blue. There might still be, LNG must still come through because I know there's still ambitions to push through with LNG. So yeah, I guess in this little transition, you might find a mix of items with the eventual goal being net zero as we go forward. Let's take the next hand from the Hendrik number 2. If you can come through, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here purely in an absolutely private capacity.
Sure.
Yes, firstly, just a statement or two, Fergus. I take my hat off to you. Byt vas, the things will happen. I'm a firm believer in green hydrogen. It is the future. So you will reap the benefits in going forward. With regards to blue hydrogen, over the past 2 months, many comments on policy level international has been made that blue hydrogen is definitely not here to stay. It should be phased out over the next 20 years. Thirdly, and that's really where my questions comes in, many statements has been made internationally, and I unfortunately have to agree with that yes, I take my hat off to Rebecca and her team. The DSI, the CSIR has done magnificent work. There's great strategy and policy documents that's been put on the table. But if you look at the commercialization strategy, for instance, it's already 70% of what's in the commercialization strategy is already at least 12 months and longer behind. Things that should have been delivered a year ago already is not even close to finalization. And so how's that going to be solved? Number one. Number two, will it actually be solved if there is such a huge incompetence within government when it comes to hydrogen? I'm sorry to say, DSI, CSIR are 100% up to speed with hydrogen, but 90% of the other government departments, I'm sorry to say, but they do not have the skills, they do not have the knowledge to work with it. So how's that going to be solved? A statement, I totally disagree. We do have many competencies and many skills in South Africa that is on that critical skills list, but many of those people are unemployable. So yes, there's many things I can talk for the next year on this. And then the last thing is the circular economy. The first discussion I had on that was in 1998 in a meeting regarding circular economy, industrial ecology, etc. Many industries jumped in, and that was basically at the end of the day, government stood in the way. Many of those things fell flat. It was never revived. As a matter of fact, over the last 15 years to 20 years, the GDP contribution by industry fell by more than 50%. There's been talk about beneficiation for 35 years, and nothing happened. How is beneficiation now suddenly going to happen? What's going to change within government, within policies for that to happen if we are actually busy losing our industry? Many questions.
Yeah. No, thanks, Hendrik. I don't know if any of the panel members would want to comment, provide a comment.
I think, I mean, thanks to Hendrik. And, like I said, Hendrik is, very actively involved in meetings. He attends the meetings around certification and so forth. And it's I think to some extent, we're not behind. I always say is the important thing is to get on the road, right? And I must say that a couple of years ago we weren't on the road, and we are at least moving in the same road. And then I'm seeing Transnet is coming to the party with some of the work they're doing. You see, IDC is coming to the party with the work they're doing, DTIC. So I think we're on the same road, and I think I'm also confident when we're talking about the issues around net zero. I mean, even if I think about years ago in government, how DFFE was thought to be the only department responsible for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and everyone's pulling that same direction. And just remember, Henry, getting for DFFE to get us all in that same direction, and get the climate change bill and so forth was a big deal. So I say if we can get behind climate change, which we've done, I think we can get behind hydrogen economy. But it's energy sector, and energy sector unfortunately is about cost. Renewables are penetrating because of cost. The hydrogen sector, believe it or not, is enabled because renewable costs were declining markedly, and it's the first part of the value chain. So government is not where it should be, but I think we're in the right direction. And I think what's important is that we partner with people who do know. So like I said, the guys like Ergo Group, DSI, we didn't know everything, but we have great partners that work along with us in the process, who do hold our hand, who do support us through the journey. So I'll leave it that way.
No, thanks, Rebecca. So at least something's happening. It may not be at the pace that we all would want it to be, but something is happening. Okay, so colleagues, we're coming towards the end. So Lawrence, I'm going to then maybe ask you to also make your comment. Then in making your comment, Rajan, I'll quickly take your hand. Then I'll then ask one final comment from all the panel members. So if colleagues can just hold on just for a few more minutes, then we can wrap up. Rajan, let's just take your hand quickly, and that will be the last hand. You on mute. Hi, Rajan.
Right.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Right.
Yes, we
Thanks.
can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not for answering the question, but maybe just something to think about and as a takeaway. Firstly, thanks, for the great discussions. I really enjoyed it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I'm one of the directors. We're working on some mega project development in ports, for renewable fuels. So thanks so much. But just getting back to, I know we spoke about policy and we spoke about some government interventions. I'm just trying to get a feel, are there ministries out there that are supporting this industry, that are giving like maybe big tax incentives or even coming, with funding, to help the private sector, to get off the ground? It is fairly new. There's a lot of risks around this thing. Should the ministry not be playing, a bigger role, even here locally, to assist and support? Thank you.
No, thanks. I don't know, Lawrence, do you want to maybe just take that and then can make a
I mean, maybe first let me comment on the previous comment that
Yes.
Hendrik Lau made. My experience is actually quite positive in terms of dealing with government officials. I think a few years ago it was definitely true that if you went outside of DSI, people would have a blank stare when you talk about hydrogen. But now we're talking to people in East London, in Gqeberha, in the Western Cape, Northern Cape, Limpopo. There's a project underway there. I know that Gauteng is. So I think yes, there might still be some misunderstandings, and I think I know where some of Hendrik's frustration comes from, and it's maybe good sometimes to be a little bit impatient and frustrated. But I take a fairly positive view. I think the South Africans are starting to understand the role of hydrogen, and it's not an easy thing to get your head around, and starting to see what it can do to decarbonize the economy directly through replacing fossil fuels, but also as a new element in our energy system, which in the future will be renewable dominated, and it's inherently intermittent. And my last comment will just be, I think we sit in a very interesting situation in Africa where we will probably see a tenfold increase in electrification, and most of that will be generated through renewables. And I think in that there's a huge need for hydrogen as part of the solution. But from my side, thank you very much, Takir, for inviting us and for the stimulating discussion from the other panel members and from the questions from the audience.
No, thanks, Lawrence. So one final comment from all our panel members. So again, the one one aspect I didn't cover and I wanted to cover. This is a civil engineering platform. We are civil engineers here. So maybe just in your closing comment, if you can just tie back, what does this mean to us as civil engineers? And it was quite important that we had this discussion because I wanted to showcase to all other civil engineers this part of the economy that's coming up that we also need to pay attention to. At the end of the day, like you said, infrastructure is needed, and you need the civil engineer to build that infrastructure. So starting with yourself, Rebecca, closing comments, and just if you can touch on the what does it mean to a civil engineer? Thanks.
You almost stole what I wanted to say, but I think what we need is we need civil engineers to innovate. Like I said, because the cost of the infrastructure to produce the molecule, move the molecule, is critical. And then again, seriously, the port facilities. Again, civil engineers are going to play a key role when it comes to infrastructure, the issues of safety. I think civil engineers are going to play a role. And I'm going to say we don't have enough civil engineers to really make this process happen. So we need you to mentor and reach back and create more like yourself.
No, thanks, Rebecca. Fergus, your closing comments?
Yep, from my side, I would like to maybe point out for the civil engineering community, many of the projects, right, will sort of come to construction phase in a very close 12 to 18-month period altogether from where I'm standing, right? And it's going to be stuff happening up north, there's stuff happening in the Western Cape. Just in the Western Cape node, we're about 4 or 5 projects there, right? That's all in feasibility stage right now. So if all comes to fruition, there's going to be a huge pull on civil engineering resources, because your renewables plants, which that the hydrogen plants will need, all have to be spaced within a 36 months period from the civil engineering, from the processing plants. So there's going to be huge infrastructure required for renewables, huge infrastructure on the plants. So the civil engineering fraternity has to see how they gear up for that. And then issue we are going to battle with is desalination and brine handling, right? Which fits into the wastewater side, the water supply and then wastewater side of civil engineering. We need to find proper solutions for the brine handling. Please, civil engineering colleagues, if you can look at that. And then ultimately, if we can store liquid hydrogen, right, there's going to be huge skills for structures that can handle deep cryogenic related loads. Piping moving very rapidly, going down to minus 253 degrees, coming back up to ambient, concrete bases that won't crack if they're exposed to extreme cold. Just some things to think about.
Oh, thanks. Maybe it sounds like a new topic we can make for one of future, fireside chats. The construction and design of facilities and brine handling. So maybe I'll touch with that based on that, Fergus.
Sure.
For a potential topic in the future. Lawrence, your closing comments?
Yeah, as an electronic engineer, I'm always jealous of civil engineers because they build such big things that you can see, whereas our stuff is mostly invisible. But I think I agree with Rebecca and Fergus's comments. This is to a large extent a construction project. We need from generation to transport to use. There's a tremendous amount of transport, and of course, engineers can do anything. So that background, if we can encourage more young people to do engineering, that's good for our future. And we'll need, I think Rebecca said we need more engineers, and I agree with that. We need more engineers and civil engineers in particular. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thank you to my panel and presenter. Thank you for your time; it's much appreciated, and thank you for sharing your views and comments. And to the audience online, thank you for holding on for the extra few minutes. And so as you can see, the field of green hydrogen, clean hydrogen, and blue hydrogen, however you want to see it, it's a growing field. There's a big international demand. A lot of things are moving. If you saw now the presentation from Rebecca, how you can see the sudden upsurge in projects and R&D. And you've got, big corporations, you've got big banks, a lot of people are investing money into research. So it's something that you need to keep an eye on. Something's happening in this space, keep an eye on the space. And so to my, civil engineers, online, we had also invited our mechanical engineers and electrical engineers. And a theme that you'll see that I'll push, and I keep on pushing the same thing, is that yourselves as civil engineers, don't only limit yourself to just civil engineering. You need to go wider than civil. Get involved in all these other, fields like the chemical engineering, process engineering, mechanical. For you to work in a field like we mentioned all opportunities of green hydrogen, or just hydrogen specifically, you need to understand all the other aspects. So to my colleagues out there, become more, what they call a polymath. Polymath engineer, where you just go wider than just your own field, and that's what I like to encourage, and I'll put that out there. So Uncle Tom, I think from my side, that's about it. And then to our audience, this is a Knowledge Trailblazer, and thank you for attending. Over to you, Uncle Tom, just to close. Thanks.
Takir, as always, thank you very much. Mind-boggling stuff. I'm glad I'm going to stick to designing roads and not worrying about all this clean, green, blue, pink hydrogen stuff you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
For the rest of you in the audience, I've already posted in the chat the invite for registering for next month's Knowledge Trailblazer. We're going to go back to our roots in civil engineering, but Fergus, Rebecca, and Lawrence, you are welcome to attend. We're going to be having a look at the city of Tshwane's wastewater problems and or related challenges that they are having, and obviously it should be another good session. So from that, good night, everybody. Thank you for supporting us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.